I hate Thanksgiving. Oh, I hate it in ways I could never put into words. I make no secret of this. Why else would I be sharing it on the goddamn internet? That, and more than one therapist has told me I need to put these feelings into words. And for what I pay them, I might as well try. Because most people, they don't understand when I say I hate Thanksgiving. That's largely because they have this ideal vision for how this dumb holiday plays out. They picture football on TV, relatives gathered under one roof, a golden brown turkey in the middle of a dinner table, pumpkin pie for dessert, and family laughing cheerfully. For most of the people in my part of the country, that's probably the case. My family lives in one of the most affluent areas in the region. I've seen how my neighbors treat Thanksgiving. For them, it's this big, gluttonous feast. But for my family, it's very different. Because for us, Thanksgiving isn't a holiday. It's a curse. It's been that way for every year of my life. And it was like that long before I was born. Now, as I share this, I'm a 23-year-old guy, the oldest of 4 siblings. And I've had a front row seat to the horrors of this curse. I'm the one who has to explain it to my siblings. I'm the one who has to take in their confused, horrified reactions. They don't always grasp the full story at first, but eventually they have to. For them, for me, for my entire family, Thanksgiving is an annual nightmare we cannot escape. It's very much a part of our family legacy. And I freely admit, the nature of that legacy is mixed to say the least. You do not end up in a neighborhood like this without leaving some skeletons along the way. Ours just happen to be very vindictive. For generations, my family has lived in this big, spacious estate. The house in the center of it all has been rebuilt and renovated multiple times. But it has everything you'd expect for a rich family. Marble floors, antique chandeliers, and more bedrooms than we've ever needed. On the outside, there's a pool with a hot tub in the backyard, a well-maintained lawn out front, and a driveway that's devoid of cracks and potholes. This is where I grew up. This is likely where I'll end up, given the nature of my family's wealth. And for 364 days a year, it's as ideal a home as anyone can hope for. But for one day, every year, on Thanksgiving, none of it matters. The comforts, the money, and the aesthetics, it's worth about as much as a wet fart in a hurricane. Because on that day, my family and I are doomed to go hungry. And I'm not just talking about a light rumble in your tummy. I'm talking about the kind of hunger that's painful, the kind only refugees and prisoners of war can appreciate. And while we're enduring that feeling, we have to accommodate a special guest for dinner. Trust me, this is not the kind of guest you want on Thanksgiving. God, I still don't know how to describe him. Not without sounding crazy. But if you want to know what it's like dealing with him, just picture this. You wake up on Thanksgiving morning, and before you can even go to the bathroom, you feel hungry. It doesn't matter what you ate last night or how much you ate. You're so hungry you could eat an entire turkey. You try to get a snack, but the second any food touches your mouth, you gag. If you try to force it in, you throw up violently. If you've ever been really hungover, it's kind of like that, but worse. And as we're dealing with this gnawing hunger, my entire family has to prepare a big Thanksgiving feast. It's not something we can pay someone else to do. We, my parents, my siblings, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, we all have to do our part. Believe me, it makes the hunger so much worse, putting in all this effort to make all this food. smells so good, but we can't eat any of it. It's hardest for the kids in the family. They don't fully understand the nature of this curse. But they learn quickly. I know I did. First time I was old enough to help, I tried to sneak a single grape into my mouth. I almost choked to death on the spot. My throat convulsed, my stomach heaved, and I vomited until I thought my insides would tear. Oh, I cried so hard. My mother tried to console me as best she could. But she, my father, and everyone else in the kitchen, they just carried on with vacant eyes, knowing the curse spared no one. They had to keep toiling in the kitchen, preparing everything down to the last slice of pumpkin pie. It's a long, agonizing process. And for a family like mine, always used to a full belly and abundant food at a moment's notice, it's even more arduous. Every Thanksgiving, the hunger builds throughout the day, becoming more painful with each passing hour. And it's always the worst when dinner is served. By the time the table is set and all the food is laid out, we're all trembling, our stomachs gnawing like wolves howling inside us. There's all this delicious food, but we can't eat it. We can't even touch it. Because it's not for us. It's for the guest. He always arrives at 5 o'clock sharp. He doesn't knock or ring the doorbell. He just opens the door and walks in. I don't know what he is. A man, a ghost, a demon. He looks human, but he's massive, obese to the point of deformity. His skin is gray and slick with sweat, his cheeks shining with grease before he's even touched the food. His clothes are all tattered but formal. A black suit stretched to its limits, shirt buttons straining, and a bow tie stained dark. He also smells of rot and smoke, and he always casts this shadow that seems to consume an entire room. This guest, he never tells us his name. No one even bothers asking anymore. He just closes the door behind him, makes his way towards the dining room, and looks at us with this wide, toothy grin. I try not to look at it directly, but trust me, you feel it. And when he speaks, you feel it even more.
Thanksgiving dinner. Bon appetit.
Nobody dares to get up. We all remain still as statues as the guest sits at the head of the table and starts eating. He eats, and he eats, and he eats, and he eats. Every appetizer, every main dish, every dessert, every last bit of the turkey, right down to the bone. Sometimes he gorges, shoving wads of food into his gaping maw. Other times, he's slow and methodical, chewing and savoring every single bite. Oh, I hate it when he does that. It makes the hunger hurt so much more. But there's nothing I can do about it. Nothing my parents can do. Nothing anyone can do. We all just sit there, waiting, watching, and listening as the guest eats our Thanksgiving dinner. And no matter how much we make, he leaves nothing behind. I've seen him eat spare peas one by one off his plate, grinning as he drops them into his mouth, our growling bellies drowned out by his messy chewing. If we've done our part, if we've made a big enough Thanksgiving feast, the guest lets us know. He'll just sit at the table, grinning in contentment, licking his fingers of any remaining food before he leaves. But if we don't, if what we made isn't enough, well, he lets us know that too.
Not enough. Still hungry.
He then gets up. He storms into the kitchen, his every step shaking the floor. He opens our pantry and our refrigerator and just keeps eating. Anything we have, be it fresh, frozen, or expired, he eats all of it. And he keeps eating until there's nothing left. More than a few relatives have tried to hide food throughout the house, but that doesn't work. The guest always finds it, eats it, and destroys everything in his way. It's only after he's full, relatively speaking, that he finally leaves.
Happy Thanksgiving. See you next year.
Every time I hear that, I get sick and angry. And I know I'm not the only one. Every year, I see it on the faces of my parents, siblings, and relatives. They resent this curse as much as I do. They hate this feeling, this painful hunger coupled with this terrifying presence. Every Thanksgiving, this is what we experience, and it's not until the following morning that relief finally comes. But even after we've gorged on whatever food we can, we know the guest will return. Another Thanksgiving will come. We dread it. We resent it. But we've given up trying to escape it. We spend every other day of the year just enjoying our wealth. And to do anything else, well, that invites consequences. Now, before you start feeling sorry for me and my family, I should probably disclose the origins of this curse. Because it did not come from nowhere. The story surrounding it has become obscured with time. I still can't claim to know the full truth, but based on what older relatives have shared, I have a pretty good idea of how it came to be. My late grandmother was the last one with first-hand knowledge. Even though she was just a girl at the time, her experience, well, it left a hell of an impression. My parents tried to shield me and my siblings from those details, but my grandmother was never a fan of blissful ignorance. And according to her, many years ago, one of our ancestors was the wealthiest man in town. How he got that wealth, that's not important. Given that particular era of American history, assume it did involve selling medicine to sick orphans. But regardless of our business dealings, our family had a good reputation. People were generally happy to work with us. Now, it wasn't all great. We weren't exactly charitable with our fortune. If we had a family motto, it would be this: make your own luck and stay out of our way. Some took that further than most. My grandmother once said her father, my great-grandfather, would have shoved a child off a cliff if it kept him from falling. I'm still not sure if he was the worst offender, but it's safe to say he wasn't a nice person. But since he was rich and the only man amongst 6 siblings, he could literally afford to be that way. But that all changed one fateful Thanksgiving. Early that morning, a historic winter storm hit the area. Grandma said she woke up to howling winds and heavy snow. She often claims that they were a sign, a warning from the heavens that our family refused to acknowledge. Thanks to our big, opulent house, our family was fairly insulated from the storm. We had plenty of fireplaces and chopped wood. We weren't going to freeze, nor would we go hungry. We had ample servants at the time, so they did all the cooking, cleaning, and whatnot. All we had to do was stay warm, work up an appetite, and wait for dinner. My grandmother often got emotional when recounting that fateful meal. She would describe in vivid yet solemn detail how everything tasted. The turkey, the stuffing, the potatoes, the gravy. It was so delicious, but so bittersweet. Because that marked the last time anyone in our family would savor Thanksgiving dinner. Because on that same stormy evening, another house several miles from ours had burned down. Nobody knows all the details. Might have been as simple as a poorly built fireplace. But for a storm like this, during a time like this, it was more than a tragic inconvenience. The family living in that house had been rich, but they'd also fallen on hard times. having made a series of bad investments. It surely didn't help that my great-grandfather didn't care for them. Grandma never learned if it was personal. She claimed he just didn't like being around the unfortunate. Maybe he was superstitious, or maybe he was just a cruel, callous POS. Personally, I think it was the latter. Because the man of that ruined house braved the worst of the storm to eventually arrive at our doorstep. My great-grandfather was there to greet him, more annoyed than shocked at his presence. He just stood there and listened as this man begged for help. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for shelter. He just asked for some food. Not a lot, just enough for his family to weather this storm. And we certainly had plenty to spare. My grandmother confirmed that we had more than enough to give that man. But my great-grandfather, going completely against the spirit of the holidays, told him no. He didn't give a reason. He just looked at this cold, desperate man and refused even the most basic of help. Now, there are a lot of conflicting stories about what unfolded next. My grandmother claims she watched this unfold before her eyes, and I believe her. The way she described the cries of this man, it's just too much. She said the man eventually fell to his knees, bawling and pleading with my great-grandfather, saying his entire family will freeze and starve. But it didn't make a difference. Eventually, the man's desperation turned to outrage. It was one thing to be uncharitable, but to be so cruel, and on Thanksgiving no less, that was just too egregious. So, in his anger, the man stood up, pointed his frostbitten finger at my great-grandfather, and told him this: "If my family suffers this night, then so too will yours, now and for every Thanksgiving to come." My grandmother was the only other person to hear those words. In the days that followed, those words hit a lot harder. Because that man and his family, they didn't survive. They all died huddled together in the rubble of their former home. Cold, hungry, and probably very angry. The local newspapers called it a tragedy. But my family, they just shrugged it off, not caring at all that this tragedy was their fault. And they didn't think they would suffer any consequences. But they were wrong. Because on Thanksgiving next year, that guest showed up. I wish I could tell you how my ancestors dealt with him and how they learned the price that came with defying him. But those are details my grandmother took to her grave. And I can't say I blame her, because until recently, I can only imagine what horrors she'd witnessed. Now, I don't have to imagine it. Because last year, my family had grown sick of this twisted Thanksgiving tradition. It didn't matter how secure our finances were. Generations of traumatic holiday memories had taken a toll, so much so that it strained my parents' marriage. Since marriage in my family has always been more business than love, it got pretty heated. I stayed out of it for the most part, happy to let other relatives take care of it. Things only got more tense as Thanksgiving drew near. I don't care to share how these arguments played out, but eventually, we all collectively decided that we weren't going to serve the guest a feast that we could not share. This time, there would be no chopping fresh vegetables, no basting a turkey for hours on end, no preparing mountains of food that we could not touch without getting violently ill. My mother and father, they were on the same page for once. We were all going to defy this obscene curse. I'll even admit, I was on board. I didn't care about all the warnings my grandmother had shared, warnings that she could never fully articulate. I was still ready to take that chance. I even started training myself to endure the hunger, fasting for extended periods in the days leading up to Thanksgiving. I thought I was ready to finally take the guest on. But I was wrong. So wrong. Thanksgiving finally comes. I wake up to that familiar hunger in my stomach. So does everyone else in my family. But this time, we're ready. It would have been easy to just sit around and do nothing. But instead, we just chose to cut corners, determined to give the guest the worst Thanksgiving meal possible. Instead of fresh turkey, we bought the cheapest pre-cooked bird we could find. We also used instant mashed potatoes, microwaved green beans, and frozen pies that were past their expiration date. For once, the kitchen wasn't thick with the smell of fresh home-cooked food. I admit that made the hunger easier to endure. My father and uncle even grinned smugly when they placed the turkey on the dining room table. It looked terrible. It didn't smell the least bit appetizing. They didn't just want to upset this guest. He, my uncle, and a few older relatives also set baseball bats and knives under the table. They were all going to jump the guest the moment he started eating. My father even took me aside and instructed me to protect my younger siblings. And I accepted that role without hesitation. But now, I really wish I hadn't. The clock strikes 5. We're all seated at the dinner table. For the first time, we're excited for our monstrous guest. We thought we had the upper hand this time. He arrives, as obese, greasy, and ugly as ever. We're all seated at the dining room table, ready to pounce. But as soon as he casts that massive shadow of his, something hits us. This sharp, stabbing sensation in our stomachs, like a hot knife twisting in conjunction with the hunger. It's unlike anything we've ever felt before. My parents keel over first. My aunts, uncles, siblings, and cousins soon follow. Pained, agonizing groans fill the room. I somehow manage to stay upright. The guest gazes upon me, his usual grin replaced with a sinister frown. He doesn't even sit at the head of the table. He just grabs a turkey leg with one hand and a wad of stuffing with another. He devours both, but grimaces immediately. He tries to eat some more, inhaling a slice of pumpkin pie, followed by thick spoons of mashed potatoes. His pale expression hardens even more.
I'm hungry. This will not do.
The lights flicker. The air grows cold and still. Through the pain and hunger, I shiver. I realize in that moment, those plans we made, they were all for nothing. This monstrous being that had cursed my family every Thanksgiving, he'd been ready for this. I'm still keeled over, leaning against the dining room table for support. I feel the guest's eyes on me. I dread what he intends to do. But then, his gaze shifts to my youngest sister, Lily. She was sitting right next to me. I'd been tasked with protecting her, but now I was powerless, and so was she. She was already on the floor, crying and clutching her stomach with both arms. The guest, he walks over to us, every footstep hitting the floor with thunderous echoes. And I watch helplessly as he reaches down with that long, flabby arm, grabs Lily by the neck, and holds her up for all of us to see. She screams in terror, crying harder and harder. My dad manages to pull himself up, yells back with desperate anger. But the guest doesn't listen. He just stares at Lily as she screams, taking sadistic joy in her tears. Then, while everyone else in the room watches in horror, he bites her arm off.
Tasty.
The sickening sound of flesh and bone cracking, the pained cries of my little sister, the disgusting slobbering sound the guest makes as he savors human flesh. I can never unsee it. I can never unhear it. It's just so, I'm sorry. That At this point, any thought of fighting back just disappears. The guest drops my crying, bleeding sister to the floor. My parents and relatives rush to her aid, ignoring their own discomfort to tend to her wound. I'm ashamed to say I was too shocked to help. I just sat there, paralyzed and terrified. I could still hear Lily crying. I could hear multiple family members crying as well. But the guest, he just goes back to eating the rest of our food. A small trail of my sister's blood remains on his chin every step of the way. A sick reminder of the price we paid for defying him. The rest of that evening passes in a nightmarish blur. The guest still eats everything, including whatever scrap of food we had in our house. My dad and uncle managed to cover my sister's wound with a tablecloth. My mom tries to call an ambulance, but the phones don't work. They never work until the guest leaves. And he takes his sweet time, knowing it'll prolong Lily's agony. And when he finally does leave, he looks back at us and scowls.
Happy Thanksgiving. Next year, cook a better dinner. Otherwise, a little girl's arm won't be enough.
That was almost a year ago to the day. Since then, things with my family have been difficult. I don't care to share all the details. Lily is both traumatized and scarred for life, and I can't help but wonder if she was the only one. Was this why my grandmother never talks about the price we paid for defying the curse? Is it possible that the guest has consumed one of my relatives? I don't care to make assumptions. I don't even want to think about it anymore. All I know is I hate Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving is almost here. And once again, we're going to have to cook a big, delicious feast. It'll be perfect. It has to be. Because if we fail, the guest will be hungry. Very, very hungry.